The consequence program had 43 facilities across 19 species, 216 active cases, and 1 human. Lena Carter hadn't slept properly in 11 weeks. The cubs had noticed. They didn't say anything, not directly. That wasn't how they operated anymore. Instead, Karr had quietly started handling intake assessments. Veshka had restructured the case file system so reviews took half the time. Ruun had begun running 3 placements independently without being asked. They were preparing for something. Lena pretended not to notice, until the morning Karr walked in and said 4 words that changed everything. "We need to talk." Lena put down her datapad. That alone told Karr she understood this was serious. When Lena put down her datapad, it meant she was giving you her full attention. She'd taught them that, without ever saying it, just by doing it every time one of them had something real to say. He sat across from her. "You're running on empty," he said. "I'm fine." "You said that 11 weeks ago." He placed a document on the table. "I ran the numbers." Lena looked at it. 216 cases, 43 facilities across 19 species, communication reviews, intake assessments, outcome reports, crisis interventions, all mapped against available hours in a standard cycle. The deficit column was significant. "The program is too large for one person," Karr said. Not an accusation. A fact. He'd learned the difference from her. "I know," Lena said. "You've known for a while." "Yes." "Then why haven't you—" "Because I didn't know if you were ready," she said quietly. Silence. Karr looked at the document, then at her. "Are we?" Lena met his gaze. "I think it's time to find out." The Vael juvenile had been transferred 6 times. 6 facilities, 6 species-appropriate placements, 6 teams of trained professionals applying 6 different methodologies. All 6 had returned the same assessment: unresponsive to intervention. Lena read the file 3 times. The Vael were an ancient species, older than the Galactic Council itself. Their culture had no concept of personal consequence. Outcomes in Vael philosophy were determined by cosmic alignment, ancestral will, external forces entirely beyond individual control. You didn't choose your actions chose you. A juvenile raised in that framework didn't recognize cause and effect as personal, which meant the entire foundation of the consequence program, actions have outcomes and you can choose which ones, was philosophically invisible to him. Every previous team had tried to teach consequence. The juvenile hadn't been resistant. He simply hadn't understood what they were asking. "This is the case I've been avoiding," Lena told Ulan. "I know," Ulan said. "That's why I saved it." If the program can't reach a Vael juvenile, it undermines the universal application argument, Ulan said. Varick's team has already filed a request for the case file. Lena closed the document. "Where are the cubs?" "Ready room," Ulan said. Karr asked to be briefed. Lena almost smiled. He'd read the intake report before she had. Of course he had. The briefing was short because Karr had already done the analysis. He'd pulled every available document on Vael cultural philosophy, 12 academic papers, 3 diplomatic interaction guides, 1 Vael-authored text on the nature of choice that had taken him 4 hours to translate. He'd made notes in the margins. Lena read them while he spoke. "The Vael don't reject consequence," he said. "They don't experience it as originating from themselves. For them, the self is a vessel, not an agent. Things happen through them, not because of them." Which means telling him his choices have outcomes is like telling him the weather is his fault, Karr said. It doesn't connect. Veshka leaned forward. "So we don't teach consequence directly." "We can't," Karr said. "Not the way we normally would." Ruun had been quiet. Now he spoke. When I sat with the Drevac juvenile, I didn't explain patience. I demonstrated it. He paused. He learned by watching, not by being told. The room was still. Lena looked at all three of them. This was the conversation she'd been waiting for. Not because she needed the answer, but because she needed to know they could find it themselves. So we don't teach him that his choices matter, Veshka said slowly. We let him watch someone for whom they do. And he draws his own conclusion, Ruun said. Karr looked at Lena. We need someone whose relationship with consequence is visible, consistent, undeniable. He paused. Someone he can observe over time. Lena set down the notes. How long do you need? As long as it takes, Karr said. She taught him that too.
3 days after the Vael briefing, Lena sent the Cubs to their first fully independent case. Not the Vael juvenile. That one needed more preparation. A different case. A young Farath male, 7 cycles, recently transferred from a creche facility that had implemented the new mandatory frameworks badly. He'd arrived angry, not at anyone specific, at everything. The kind of anger that comes from being processed rather than seen. Lena watched the briefing feed from her office. She did not intervene. Karr led the intake session. He didn't open with rules or frameworks. He opened with a question. What did you want to be doing today instead of this? The Farath juvenile stared at him. Nobody had ever asked that. He answered, haltingly, then less haltingly, something about a mechanics workshop back at the creche that he'd been pulled from for the transfer. Veshka, without a word, pulled up a station maintenance request that had been sitting unactioned for 3 weeks, a ventilation calibration in the juvenile wing. We have tools, she said, and a problem that needs solving. The Farath juvenile looked at the request, then at Veshka. Then he picked up a tool. Ruun documented everything, not for the case file, but for the framework Veshka was building. Every approach that worked, every moment a juvenile chose engagement over resistance. Lena watched all 3 of them work. She felt something unfamiliar. Not pride. She'd felt that for a while. Something quieter. The specific piece of knowing that what you built will survive without you.
His name was Sev. He was 9 cycles old and had the stillness of someone much older. Not calm, but absent. Present in body, somewhere else entirely in mind. He didn't resist the placement. He didn't resist anything. He simply existed in whatever space he was placed in, observing without comment, responding without investment. 6 previous teams had interpreted this as withdrawal. Ruun interpreted it differently. He's watching, he told Karr. He watches everything. He just doesn't know what he's looking for yet. The approach they designed was simple, almost uncomfortably so. They didn't run sessions with Sev. They ran sessions near him. Karr worked through case reviews at a table in the shared space. Veshka built assessment frameworks on her datapad. Ruun wrote. Sev watched. Day 3, he moved closer. Not to interact, to see the screen better. Day 5, he asked Veshka what she was building. She told him, precisely, technically, without simplifying. She treated him like someone capable of understanding. He was. Day 7, he pointed at an inefficiency in her categorization structure. He was right. Veshka corrected it without making it significant. Just a small nod, a quick adjustment, moving on. But Karr saw Sev's expression in that moment. Something shifted. Not consequence, not yet, but the first necessary thing before consequence could exist. The understanding that what he noticed mattered, but he could see something others missed, that he was not just a vessel.
The moment came on day 11. Unplanned, unscripted. The best moments always were. A junior program aide had made an error in a case reassignment, a small administrative mistake that would have sent a recently stabilized Drevac juvenile back to an unsuitable placement, the kind of error that got missed in the volume of 216 active cases. Sev caught it.
He'd been sitting in the workspace, observing as usual, when he noticed the reassignment document on the shared display. He'd been watching case processing for 11 days. He understood the system, not because anyone had taught him, but because he'd watched carefully enough to learn it himself. He sat with the error for 4 minutes. Karr noticed him looking, but didn't intervene. Then Sev stood up, walked to the display, pulled up the case file, and flagged the error. Not to Karr, not to Veshka, to the program system directly, the formal correction channel that required the filer to attach their name and reasoning. He attached his name. He wrote 3 sentences of clear, precise reasoning. Then he sat back down. Karr looked at the correction notification, then at Sev. "You knew you didn't have to do that," he said. Sev considered this. The juvenile would have been harmed. Yes. I could see it. Others couldn't. Yes. A long pause. Then I had to, Sev said. Simply, completely. Karr sat very still. Because that, right there, was consequence understood not as rule, not as instruction, but as personal truth. I could see it. Therefore, I was responsible for it. He sent Lena 1 message. 3 words. Sev chose today.
Lena presented the Sev case to the full program council 6 weeks later, not as a success story, as a methodology expansion, the Vael approach, observation-based integration, consequence taught not through instruction, but through immersion in an environment where it was lived visibly every day. The council approved its addition to the program framework unanimously. Varkai's representative attended, said nothing, filed no objections. Afterward, Lena found the cubs in the corridor, the same corridor outside the council chamber that had become, somehow, their place, where they waited, where they processed, where the real conversations happened. Sev was with them. He'd asked to observe the council session. Karr had approved it without consulting Lena. She hadn't minded. He flagged 2 procedural inefficiencies in the council's case review process, Veshka said. I've asked him to document them formally. He agreed, Ruun added. Lena looked at Sev. He met her gaze with the same still observation he'd arrived with, but different now. Directed. Present. You joined the program, she said. I was already in it, he replied. I just chose to stay. Lena stood with that for a moment. Then she looked at all 3 cubs. 4 months ago, she'd walked into a nursery alone with 1 bag and no armor to face 3 juveniles who'd broken 9 trained professionals. Now those 3 juveniles were running 43 facilities across 19 species, training program associates, designing original methodology, and growing a program that the galaxy had tried to shut down and couldn't, because it was no longer hers. It was theirs. Rex appeared at the corridor entrance. He looked at the group. 4 juveniles of 4 different species standing quietly together outside a council chamber, and said nothing for a long moment. Then he looked at Lena. You're going to run out of corridor, he said quietly. Lena smiled. Then we'll need a bigger building. Across the galaxy that evening, 216 juveniles went to sleep in placements that were working. Not because they'd been forced, not because they'd been broken, because someone had given them the tools and trusted them to choose. And somewhere in a nursery that had once echoed with wars, 4 species sat together in comfortable silence, choosing every day to be more than their instincts.